So we return to the question that began our journey. Why do idiots get rich while you struggle? At first glance, the answer seemed cruel, that the world is unfair, that shallow confidence, manipulation, and noise often outshine depth, honesty, and thought. But across these 6 insights, we've seen that the picture is more complicated and perhaps more liberating than that. We discovered first that confidence outshines competence. The world mistakes certainty for wisdom, and so the bold rise faster than the cautious. Then we saw that the marketplace rewards exploitation, not wisdom, that our systems are tilted toward those willing to manipulate rather than those who act with integrity. We uncovered that society loves simple stories, not complex truths. People crave clarity, even if it is false, and the fool thrives by reducing the world into slogans. We saw too that intelligence can become a prison, that overthinking, self-doubt, and hesitation keep the wise from acting, while the fool charges forward. We explored how the mask of success is more valuable than the reality. Appearances often command more power than substance. And finally, we arrived at the deepest truth. True wealth lies beyond money. Riches without meaning are hollow, while a modest life filled with love, freedom, and purpose is richer than any fortune. What emerges is a sobering but empowering picture. Yes, the world rewards the foolish in ways that sting. Yes, the thoughtful will always face disadvantages in systems that prize appearance over depth. But this does not mean you are powerless, because knowing the rules changes how you play the game. The task is not to become a fool, but to learn from their tactics without losing your soul, to pair competence with confidence, to protect yourself from exploitation while keeping your integrity, to speak truths through stories simple enough to spread, yet deep enough to endure, to act before fear imprisons you, to shape an image that reflects your reality rather than hides it, and to remember always that money is a tool, not the goal, that real wealth is meaning, freedom, and depth. The paradox of life is this: fools may grow rich in numbers, but the wise can grow rich in being. And when the numbers fade, being remains. So the question I leave you with is this: what kind of wealth do you wish to pursue? The fleeting applause of image and accumulation, or the quiet, lasting richness of a life deeply lived? If this journey has resonated with you, I invite you to stay with us, subscribe, share your reflections in the comments, and join our weekly explorations. Not because we promise easy answers, but because together, in dialogue, we can resist the noise, embrace the depth, and build lives that matter. The world will always have its fools, but perhaps if you dare to live wisely, courageously, and meaningfully, you will find that you are never struggling at all. You are simply walking a rarer path. And maybe that is the richest life of all. Picture the wealthy man at the end of his life. His accounts are full, his possessions vast, yet his relationships are shallow, his days empty, and his heart restless. Then picture another, a woman with modest means, who walks slowly through her garden, surrounded by family, stories, and quiet joy. Which of these two is richer? Society shouts that money is the ultimate measure of wealth. Yet across cultures and centuries, the wisest thinkers have reminded us of another truth. Riches without meaning are poverty in disguise. Socrates, who lived in near poverty himself, argued that true wealth comes not from possessions, but from virtue and wisdom. He is richest, he once said, who is content with the least, For content is the wealth of nature. For him, money was useful, but it was never the goal. The examined life mattered more. Tolstoy, too, saw the emptiness of material obsession. Despite his fame and success, he fell into despair until he discovered a simpler truth. Happiness lay not in riches, but in love, service, and spiritual depth. Wealth, he realized, could easily become a distraction from the real task of life, the search for meaning. Psychology today echoes this. Research on well-being shows that beyond a certain point, more money does little to increase happiness. What truly matters are relationships, purpose, autonomy, and inner peace. Yet the irony remains. Those who chase only money often sacrifice these very treasures in the process. This is why so many idiots appear to win in the game of wealth. They devote themselves entirely to accumulation, blind to higher values. They may rise in riches, but they often fall in depth. Meanwhile, the thoughtful person struggles not because they lack ability, but because their gaze is divided. They see both money and meaning, and they refuse to lose the latter in pursuit of the former. This is not weakness, it is wisdom, because at the end of life, no one clutches their bank statements. They cling to memories, to love, to the sense that their days mattered. Yet, there is also a danger in romanticizing poverty. Socrates himself warned against neglecting basic needs. Money is not evil. It is a tool. It grants freedom, security, and the capacity to shape one's life. But when it becomes the master instead of the servant, it enslaves. The task for the wise, then, is balance, to earn enough to sustain freedom, but not to sacrifice freedom for endless earning, to see money as a means, not an end, to define wealth not by numbers in an account, but by the depth of one's life. Consider this. Many people envy the rich, but how many rich secretly envy the free? The traveler who owns little, but has the world, the artist who lives modestly but creates without fear, the parent who earns just enough but comes home to laughter every night. In this sense, the greatest wealth may be invisible. Peace of mind, love, depth, and freedom, these cannot be bought, only lived. So perhaps the guiding question here is this: when you measure your life, will you measure it by what you owned or by how fully you lived, loved, and grew? Picture two people walking into a room. The first is genuinely wealthy, but understated. He dresses simply, avoids drawing attention, and carries himself with quiet humility. The second is deeply in debt, but he wears the latest fashion, drives a leased luxury car, and speaks as though he owns the world, whose presence commands more attention. In our age, it is often the mask, not the reality, that shapes how others respond. Michel Foucault taught us that power is not just about material resources, but about perception, about controlling the narrative of who you are. Those who master appearances can wield more influence than those who possess substance, but hide it. In other words, the image of success often matters more than success itself. This is why social media thrives. Influencers curate staged lives of abundance, projecting wealth, beauty, and freedom. Their followers believe the mask, even when reality is far different. The image becomes currency, and many of these individuals rise to riches, not because they are truly successful, but because they successfully sell the appearance of success. Psychology offers a similar perspective. Braving Goffman, The sociologist described human life as a performance, each of us actors presenting ourselves on a stage. But some actors are more skilled at impression management than others. The idiot, who boldly performs confidence and prosperity, often persuades others to treat them as successful, creating opportunities that eventually make the mask real. Meanwhile, the thoughtful person often resists the mask. They want authenticity. They refuse to exaggerate, to polish, to promote themselves. And so, ironically, their reality remains hidden, unseen, undervalued, ignored. This explains why people with fewer qualifications sometimes get the job, why shallow entrepreneurs raise millions in funding, and why showmen are celebrated while scholars remain obscure. In a culture addicted to image, the mask is its own form of wealth. But there is a danger here. The mask can consume the person behind it. When image becomes everything, substance erodes. The person who lives only through appearances eventually feels hollow, enslaved to performance. They must maintain the illusion at all costs, even as the reality collapses. We see this in celebrities, influencers, even politicians who are eventually destroyed by the very mask that made them powerful. So what can the thoughtful person learn from this? Not to abandon authenticity, but to understand the power of perception. Socrates may have believed that the unexamined life is not worth living, but in public life, the unseen life often remains unheard. If you do not communicate who you are, others will never know. This does not mean living a lie. It means learning to craft your truth into an image that the world can see, to translate substance into signals, to present yourself in ways that reflect your reality, but also command recognition. Think of it like a book. A brilliant manuscript left in a drawer changes nothing, but a book with a powerful cover and a compelling introduction has a chance to reach the world. The cover is not the essence, but it is the invitation. And so the challenge is this: can you wear a mask that reveals rather than deceives? A mask that communicates your depth without betraying it? Perhaps the guiding question here is this: what truth within you deserves to be seen, and how might you shape it into an image that others cannot ignore? Imagine a chess player staring at the board. The fool across from him moves quickly, boldly, without hesitation. His moves are clumsy, even reckless, yet he plays with energy, confidence, and joy. The intelligent player, by contrast, sits frozen. He sees too much. Every move opens 10 possibilities, each with potential risks. The weight of his awareness slows him down until, eventually, the reckless fool checkmates him, not because he was better, but because he acted. This is the paradox. Intelligence, the very thing meant to empower us, can become a prison. Arthur Schopenhauer saw this in The Thoughtful Person's Curse. The ability to perceive suffering, futility, and endless complexity more vividly than others. Intelligence makes one cautious, skeptical, even weary. Meanwhile, the less intelligent, oblivious to dangers and contradictions, stride forward, seemingly free. Carl Jung added another dimension. He observed that those who over-identify with intellect often repress instinct, spontaneity, and action. Their lives become confined to thought, analysis, and inner debate. They think, but do not move. They imagine, but do not risk. In Jung's language, the neglected shadow, the raw, instinctual part of the psyche, grows stronger in the unconscious, sabotaging them with hesitation and self-doubt. Psychology today calls this analysis paralysis. Highly intelligent people often get stuck weighing every option, trying to make the perfect choice. But in a fast-moving world, hesitation is costly. The fool, by charging forward, may stumble, but at least he gains ground. This explains why, in careers, relationships, and business, reckless individuals often advance while thoughtful ones remain stuck. The fool asks for the raise without overthinking whether they deserve it. The fool launches the project without obsessing over every detail. The fool proposes boldly, while the intelligent person waits for the right moment that never comes. But here is the painful truth. Intelligence is not the problem. Fear is. The prison of intelligence is built not by thought itself, but by the fear of error, failure, and rejection. The fool is free because he does not fear enough. The wise are trapped because they fear too much. The challenge then is not to abandon intelligence, but to free it from paralysis. Kierkegaard suggested that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it, to make a leap, even when certainty is impossible. Consider the myth of Icarus. His wings allowed him to fly, but his recklessness destroyed him. Yet what of the one who never dares to fly at all? Is that not also a tragedy? Intelligence gives us wings, but if we never take off because we fear falling, then the wings themselves become chains. So what is the way forward? The thoughtful person must learn to act without perfect clarity, to risk without perfect safety, to move even while uncertain. Jung might say, integrate the shadow, allow some boldness, some instinct, some raw daring to balance the weight of thought. Because in truth, action teaches what thought cannot. Mistakes are not just failures. They are the forge of wisdom. The fool stumbles blindly into fortune. Because he dares, the wise can stumble towards something greater, not blind fortune, but hard-earned depth, if they dare as well. So let me leave you with this question. What decision in your life are you postponing, not because you lack intelligence, but because you fear imperfection? And what would happen if you chose to act anyway? Think about the last time you scrolled through social media. Which posts grabbed your attention? Were they long, thoughtful analyses, or short, catchy headlines, bold statements, and quick sound bites? We live in an age where attention is currency, and nothing captures attention faster than simplicity. The person who reduces reality into a clear, memorable slogan often rises, while the thinker who insists on nuance is ignored. But this is not just a problem of our time. Kierkegaard once observed that most people fear the complexity of existence, so they escape into simple illusions. Life, with all its uncertainty and paradox, is overwhelming, so humans cling to stories that promise clarity, even if they are false. Camus echoed this idea. He argued that people prefer comforting fictions to the absurdity of existence. We would rather believe a lie that makes sense than confront a truth that unsettles us. This is why idiots often succeed. They simplify, they reduce, they make bold claims without hesitation. This is the secret to success. This one trick will change your life. This group is to blame for all your problems. Such slogans are powerful because they strip away complexity and offer certainty in a world full of doubt. The wise, however, know better. They know that reality is layered, contradictory, and resistant to easy answers. But when they speak, their nuance sounds like hesitation Their refusal to reduce complexity makes them harder to follow, harder to quote, harder to market, and so their wisdom, while true, struggles to spread. This is why politicians who shout simple slogans often win elections, while those who speak carefully about policy lose. It is why influencers with catchphrases outgrow educators with depth. It is why the idiot who tells a story in black and white gets rich, while the thinker who paints in shades of gray struggles for recognition. The tragedy is that simple stories can move masses, while complex truths often reach only the few willing to listen deeply. But there is also a lesson here. Plato's allegory of the cave reminds us that most people prefer the shadows, the simple projections on the wall, to the painful light of reality outside. To drag people into truth requires not only depth, but skillful storytelling, because without story, truth remains invisible. This is where the intelligent person must learn from the fool, not by abandoning complexity, but by shaping it into narratives people can grasp. Einstein himself once said, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." The task of wisdom is not to drown in complexity, but to translate it, to make the profound accessible without making it shallow. So the lesson here is not despair, but challenge. The masses may always crave simplicity, but the wise can learn to speak in images, metaphors, and stories that honor truth while still reaching hearts. That is why philosophers like Socrates taught not with lectures, but with dialogue and parable. They understood that truth must be carried in a form people can hold. And so, perhaps the guiding question here is this: how can you translate the complexity you see into stories so simple that even the fool could grasp them, but so deep that only the wise could fully understand them? Imagine a man running a business. He knows that if he cuts corners, underpays his workers, and exaggerates his product's value, he will make far more money than if he operates with honesty and fairness. He doesn't lose sleep over ethics, he just wants profit. Across the street, another entrepreneur struggles. She insists on paying her staff well, sourcing responsibly, and being transparent with customers. Her conscience is clear, but her margins are thin. In the end, who prospers faster in the modern marketplace? Too often, it is the exploiter, not the wise. This reality is not new. Machiavelli in The Prince famously argued that rulers who cling too tightly to virtue are easily destroyed by those willing to manipulate, deceive, and exploit. It is better to be feared than loved, he wrote, suggesting that power respects cunning more than kindness. In other words, wisdom and virtue are noble, but exploitation wins the crown. Karl Marx carried this critique into the modern economy. He showed how capitalism itself often rewards those who exploit labor most efficiently. The owners of production accumulate wealth, not because they are the wisest or most moral, but because they maximize profit, often at the expense of others' well-being. This explains much of what we see today. Corporations growing rich by manipulating consumer desire, billionaires expanding fortunes by squeezing wages, influencers monetizing attention through shallow spectacle. Exploitation, not wisdom, is the currency of the marketplace. Psychology also confirms this unsettling truth. Studies on dark triad personality traits, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy show that individuals high in these traits often advance in competitive environments. Their lack of empathy, willingness to manipulate, and hunger for status make them perfectly suited for systems that reward profit above all. Does this mean the thoughtful and ethical person is doomed? Not necessarily, but it does mean they must understand the rules of the game. Wisdom by itself is not enough in a system that rewards exploitation. To thrive, the wise must learn to protect themselves from being used, to recognize manipulation when it appears, and to navigate with both integrity and strategy. Jung would call this the integration of the shadow, the ability to acknowledge one's own potential for cunning, not to abuse it, but to prevent being crushed by those who will. Consider the myth of Odysseus. He was not the strongest of the Greeks, nor the most virtuous, but he was cunning. His wisdom was practical. He understood that survival and victory sometimes required strategy, even trickery, as with the Trojan horse. His example shows that wisdom which refuses all cunning risks becoming powerless. So here is the paradox. In a marketplace where exploitation is rewarded, clinging only to pure virtue can leave one defenseless. But becoming an exploiter oneself corrupts the soul. The task is to find the balance, to remain guided by wisdom, yet not naive about the world's ruthlessness. Perhaps the real skill is to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves, as an ancient text once put it. To play the game with open eyes, neither blind to exploitation nor enslaved by it. And maybe the guiding question here is this: how can you live with integrity while also developing the strategic strength to survive in a world that rewards those without it? Picture a room filled with people at a networking event. In one corner stands a man who knows very little, yet speaks with booming certainty about business, politics, and life. His words are riddled with half-truths and cliches, but his delivery is so bold that heads nod, laughter follows, and contacts are exchanged. Across the room stands another person, thoughtful, intelligent, deeply knowledgeable. They hesitate before speaking, weighing their words, wanting to avoid exaggeration or error. Their voice is quieter, their posture less assertive. Few notice them. This moment captures one of life's cruel realities. Confidence is often mistaken for competence. Nietzsche, in his critique of the herd, warned that people naturally follow those who appear strong and certain. Truth, in his view, matters less in the public sphere than the projection of power. The herd does not want complexity. It wants clarity, direction, and assurance, even if it comes from the mouth of a fool. Psychology later confirmed this intuition. The Dunning-Kruger effect shows that those with the least knowledge are often the most confident, while the truly skilled tend to underestimate themselves. The fool's ignorance protects them from doubt, while the intelligent person's awareness of complexity often breeds hesitation. This is why, in the competitive game of wealth, the loud rise faster than the thoughtful. Investors back bold promises, not cautious analysis. Employers reward charismatic self-promotion, not quiet diligence. Audiences click on certainty, not nuance. And so the confident fool, unburdened by self-doubt, charges forward, while the competent thinker lingers, second-guessing. But here is the deeper truth. The problem is not intelligence itself. It is the way intelligence often manifests in a world that prizes performance. The wise hesitate because they see the shades of gray, the risks, the possible errors. Their humility, virtuous in a philosophical sense, becomes a disadvantage in a marketplace that confuses humility with weakness. Schopenhauer once remarked, that the wise have always said the same things, and fools, who are the majority, have always done just the opposite. What he did not add is that fools succeed precisely because their recklessness mirrors what the majority unconsciously desires: reassurance, simple answers, and the illusion of certainty. So what do we do with this insight? The answer is not to abandon intelligence, nor to despise confidence. Rather, it is to recognize that in many arenas of life, how something is said matters just as much as what is said. Competence without confidence remains invisible. Confidence without competence, though dangerous, can command the room. This is why philosophers like Aristotle emphasized rhetoric, the art of persuasion, alongside logic and ethics. He understood that truth alone is not enough. Truth must be communicated in a way that captures attention. Otherwise, it withers unheard. The challenge for the thoughtful person, then, is not to imitate the fool, but to cultivate courage, the courage to stand by one's knowledge with the same conviction the fool applies to their ignorance, to learn the art of speaking clearly, confidently, and persuasively without betraying nuance or integrity. So the next time you feel overshadowed by someone whose words are shallow but loud, remember this paradox. Their confidence is their weapon. Your competence is yours. But only when you learn to give your competence a confident voice will others see it. And perhaps the guiding question here is this: what would it look like if you allowed your intelligence to speak with the boldness of the fool, but with the depth of the wise? Why is it that some of the most foolish people you've ever met, people with shallow ideas, careless habits, and no real depth of thought, somehow manage to rise into wealth and success, while you, with all your effort, struggle to get by? It is one of the cruelest paradoxes of modern life. Intelligence does not guarantee prosperity, and wisdom does not guarantee wealth. In fact, it often seems that the more thoughtful a person is, the more invisible they become in a world that rewards noise, not substance. This contradiction creates a quiet pain in us, because we want to believe the world is fair, that intelligence, hard work, and virtue should naturally be recognized and rewarded. And yet, time after time, we see mediocrity celebrated, stupidity broadcasted, and cunning disguised as brilliance, while depth, patience, and true insight are ignored. Philosophers have wrestled with this paradox for centuries. Nietzsche warned us that the herd rewards conformity, not brilliance. Schopenhauer noted that wealth often flows to those skilled in manipulation rather than those devoted to truth. And Carl Jung suggested that many so-called successful people are simply those most willing to project an image, even if it hides emptiness beneath. So the question lingers: why do idiots get rich, while the thoughtful struggle? In this video, we will not simply complain about the unfairness of the world. Instead, we will try to understand it deeply, honestly, and without illusions, because only then can we decide how to live within it. Across this journey, we will explore 6 insights from philosophy, psychology, and lived experience that reveal why this paradox exists, and more importantly, how you can respond to it without losing your dignity, your integrity, or your sense of meaning. If you've ever felt overlooked while others rise on empty confidence, this exploration is for you, because sometimes the truth is not only shocking, it is liberating.